Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's going on, everybody? It is the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to go ahead and extend a happy holidays, and I hope everybody's, Turkey Day, Thanksgiving, holiday season so far was really well done. Everybody got to eat well, or, if you're out there working on the grind, if you're out there during retail season, stay safe, and hopefully it'll all be over soon, because I understand that retail life is nothing short of abysmal during this time of life. So, got a lot of things to cover to make if you are in retail, let's make your retail life a little bit less stressful, or we might end up making it a little bit more stressful, because, alongside Thanksgiving, family members, retail, Black Friday stuff, there's Cyber Monday too, because, I'm recording this, we're taping this on Cyber Monday. So if you got some deals ready to go ahead and find out soon. Go ahead and get those deals going. Fantasy football is all over the place, and it is, in fact, getting scary. It's getting scary, man. Fantasy football is scaring the daylights out of me, and I don't know what to do, honestly. No clue what to do. Fantasy is looking like it is going to be a loss on both sides this week, but I'm still projected to win in one league, but I'm a little nervous. There's a lot of points that I left on the table. I'll go ahead and talk about the one that's making me nervous right now, because the other one is already in the bucket. I've lost, and it is what it is. So I am down 80.52 to 56.50. My opponent he had Taysom Hill, who had a solid day for all you can expect out of Taysom Hill against the Broncos defense. The Broncos defense is really good on the front seven, and they made it very difficult for him to get in a rhythm. And without our offensive linemen in, some with concussion, one with COVID, it was tougher than what you would like to see. Calvin Ridley had a solid day with 11 points. He had a touchdown. Brandon Cooks also had a solid day on Thanksgiving Day. In that drubbing, the two drubbings, should I say, because Las Vegas let everybody down, I'm sure. Not just me, but Zeke had a pretty bad day, and they lost against Washington, Washington's front seven really put some emphasis on the run game and just stopping people in general. Kareem Hunt didn't do he had a solid day for non-PPR standards, but it was it was a little bit less to be desired. Of course, we know that Nick Chubb ate up a lot of the touches, and that backfield is ran by a duo system. So sometimes you feast, sometimes you famine. I know a lot of guys were upset that Kareem Hunt was the one who got the touchdown last week. So I guess karma comes in bunches. Austin Hooper had a solid day. He had a touchdown. He had 7 points for him. He had Devontae Adams with 12, which is solid for him. And he had Mr. Carlson, Daniel Carlson, and that is, a solid 6 points. And then he had the New York defense, so a lot of good points all around. He had an even scoring day. I have Russell Wilson left to play tonight as I'm recording this, so hopefully things go well for him. And I had Amari Cooper had a really big day, 17.2 fantasy points in non-PPR, so he really ate. Stephon Diggs did nothing, even though they beat the Los Angeles Chargers. He didn't really do too much, only 39 yards basically. Josh Jacobs did absolutely nothing, and he's questionable with an injury moving forward. into next week. So that's something to look out for if you own Josh Jacobs. Miles Sanders is yet to play. Hopefully he has a big game. And, I have Dallas Goedert as well. I picked him off. I finally let go of Jared Cook, as it seems like he's missing snaps now as far as snap counts versus the backup tight end for the Saints. So, or should I say the rookie tight end for the Saints? He's not really a backup. They use him in different ways, but their rookie has more blocking snaps, and that might resonate well because he can catch two. And it makes sense because Jared Cook, his contract is coming up. Things might be shifting on that side of the positional charts for the Saints. I had Justin Jefferson, who had 19 points, which was amazing. But at the same time, it hurt me bad because I'm playing up against him, and I'll talk about it later. I have Myers, the kicker for Seattle, so that will, of course, come back and help me well. And I also had New Orleans defense starting against Denver with 14 solid points. Problem is my bench went off for the most part in some skill positions. I had Jarvis Landry. I didn't trust him against Jacksonville, and it's not really because of the matchup, but it was mostly because of his quarterback and the way they decide to play football. I won't start him next week either. Like, this is not going to deter me from making choices like that. Unless there's like a 2-week stretch, 3-week stretch where I start to see Jarvis Landry really start to come on, I'm not looking at this too harshly. And David Montgomery, who has been a definition of wishy-washy, had his biggest game of the year by far, and it was all in garbage time, so it doesn't really matter. Josh Kelly had 9.5 fantasy points. Andy Dalton had 13, but I was not going to start Andy Dalton no matter what, so that doesn't matter too much. But Josh Kelly having 9.5 points is solid, to say the least. But yeah, man, I think all things well considered, I should have this week in the bag just off of Russell Wilson alone. But we've seen time and time again things can change and games can be difficult. But that is the case. That's what we're looking like in the Yahoo sense. And if I win, I will be 7-5 going into the final week of the regular fantasy season, and thus we will be doing quite well. I should just go ahead and put this out because I just saw a latest transaction. I didn't see this on Sunday. Somebody dropped T. Higgins for Hinton, and I pray they didn't start him. I hope that wasn't the case, right? I hope that was not the case, but hilarious move right there. Don't know why it was had. I wouldn't have done it, but once again, you see things all the time that you question and wonder what's going on. Why did that guy think that was a good move? Why would he make that decision? Well, it is what it is. Hopefully people aren't paying attention too hard, so I can drop Michael Gallup and pick up T. Higgins, because that would be dope. Another good wide receiver addition, because we are going to have a lot of things moving and shaking around that league. But, all things well that happened, I'll be 7-5, and I'll be honestly in a complete driver's seat as my team is starting to come together really strongly. Although the Josh Jacobs thing does hurt. That's the bad thing. Josh Jacobs does hurt. So I have already lost this week in my ESPN league, and here is why. Or this is how it happened, should I say. He already has 103.64. I have 94.62. And I have no one left to play. Everybody's done. There was no play here that would have secured me a win that would have made sense. So looking at my bench would do nothing for me. I am, alas, in pain. He had Aaron Rodgers, who played last night, who basically put the nail in the coffin with 25.64 points. He had Duke Johnson tap in to 17 points, which we'll talk about later, as Duke Johnson burned me in so many different ways that it's just unfathomable. So that happened. He has Benny Snell, who's yet to play. So, side note, Pittsburgh and Baltimore are slated to play Wednesday, not Tuesday anymore. So they moved from Thanksgiving night to Tuesday and now to Wednesday. Hopefully no more positive tests in this outbreak scenario. However, this is not looking well at all. At all. However, let's keep moving forward to talk about more pain, because Duke Johnson with 17, that hurts a lot. Calvin Ridley scored a touchdown and had 6 receptions for 50 yards. So 17 points. That kind of hurts because literally he did nothing else after the game. He got injured, in fact, and he just stopped playing. He had Darren Fells in his lineup with a fat 0, and he had A.J. Green in his lineup with another 0. Let's keep this in mind. 2 people with 0s, no points in the lineup, and I'm losing. I have lost. Not even losing anymore. It is a loss. I have lost. I'm very upset about this. This is nothing. I can't blame myself. I can't blame anybody, but I lost. Justin Jefferson. So here we go. 1 point PPR. He had 26 fantasy points, 7 receptions, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns. You just can't make this sort of thing up. He dominated at that point. As that Justin Jefferson beat me. I will put that into rest. Justin Jefferson was the one who beat me. Congratulations to him. He had Miami's defense with 13 points, 2 interceptions, and only gave up 3 points. They played the Jets. It was a very much a plus matchup extraordinaire, and that's all that was. He had Matt Prater as his kicker, who gave him 5 points, nothing to scoff at. And that was his team. He also had a few quarterbacks on his bench that wouldn't have, if he would have started one of them, I might still have a chance to win. But who was going to sit Aaron Rodgers against the Bears? I wouldn't have. It made sense. So I had Taysom Hill starting with 17.5 points, fantasy points. Alvin Kamara with a very mediocre 6 points. So now we've gone from 9 points to 6 for Alvin Kamara on the season thus far. So I'm going to hold out and believe that this is more to do with Denver's defense and how they moved, and just they didn't want to end up getting Kamara hurt, because they definitely fed Latavius Murray to no end, and that was obvious from jump, and that seemed to be what the case was. So I'm not stressed out yet. Well, I don't have many weeks to still stay stressed out, but hopefully I'll make the fantasy playoffs so I won't be too hurt. Ronald Jones, when it looked like things were bleak, Ronald Jones scored a catching touchdown and did me a solid by giving me 17 points. Without that, this game would have been so much worse. So much worse. But 17 points from Ronald Jones, 9 points from Michael Thomas in a matchup that did not feature a lot of pass catching on both sides of the ball. So that is solid, to say the least. I started Nelson Aguilar, who only gave me 10.4 points. I still believe that he will be the good start off of everybody else who's on my bench currently. So I'm not too concerned about that fact at all. I'm not too concerned about that fact. Austin Hooper with 9 points. Like I said earlier, he scored a touchdown, which is great news for Austin Hooper believers. I started Michael Pittman Jr. against Tennessee, thinking that, Indianapolis has a chance against Tennessee because their defense is not that great. But clearly, something went wrong in Indianapolis. Don't know what happened, but 4.8 points was not what I was expecting to see. I was hoping for a better performance, but I digress. That's just kind of what ended up happening. I had New York at 12 points, which was a great thing considering that they gave up 17 points near the end. But that interception and 2 forced fumbles, or 2 fumble recoveries, really did help. And then, I'm sorry, not against it was against Cincinnati. So it was not against the Panthers. And then I had Joey Sly, who is on the Panthers, which is probably why I got mixed up. Interesting tidbit of information, Cam Akers, 14 points. Cam Akers, maybe he is catching some glimpse of, is it happening? Is it happening? He had 9 rushing attempts. He had 84 yards and a touchdown on the running end. He got no looks in the passing game. But right now what we're seeing is everything is about opportunity. But over the last 4 games, he's had 9 touches, 10 touches, 5, and 9. So he's getting a solid workload so far, and he's been going up against some pretty rough matchups, as we've seen. And he seems like he's being more involved in the offense. So we might be trying to start him in a decent matchup against Arizona. So let's keep in mind, he didn't do really anything against Seattle, so that kind of hurts the ideology about this whole thing. But, against Tampa Bay, who has a solid run defense, 8.9 points, nothing to scoff at from running backs, especially these days. Miami had 6.4, and he had 9 against the San Francisco defense that is still sneaky good, so especially against the run. So I think that it might be time to look at this. So it came, most of his production came in an electrifying second half drive, which he got the ball on all 3 plays that came away with 67 yards and a touchdown. Meanwhile, of course, Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown just for 23 yards on 13 carries. And though Brown added a pair of receptions on 3 targets, Akers' first two career touchdowns have come over the last 2 games, and career best performance indicates that he is finding his stride after missing time earlier this season, and he should expect to be having similar production and involvement against against Arizona. But let's take a break, and we'll come back talking more football. GSMC.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, GSMC fantasy football fans, we are back, and let's go ahead and get into some player awards, some teams of the week, some key takeaways, and all that from week 12, courtesy of Pro Football Focus. Let's get into it. So the Pro Football Focus team of the week. This is where Pro Football Focus breaks down their weeks, and they break down week 12 in greater detail using advanced data and their own unique play-by-play grading, and here they present the teams of the week. So on offense, of course, Patrick Mahomes, running back, Nick Chubb, Jarvis Landry as wide receiver 1, Tyreek Hill as wide receiver 2. Really, they could be flip-flopped. 1s and 2s don't matter in this scenario. We didn't even talk about Tyreek, but I'm sure we'll get to it. Rob Gronkowski as tight end. Their flex was Will Fuller, who news just broke that he will be suspended for 6 games. So basically the remainder of the season, Will Fuller will be done because of prescribed medication that was on the NFL no-fly list when it comes to performance-enhancing drugs, which, of course, Will Fuller is saying that his doctor prescribed him this, trusting him that this was okay, and turns out it was not due to an injury. Left tackle, DJ Humphries, left guard, David Edwards, center Alex Mack for the Falcons, right guard for the Tennessee Titans, Nate Davis, and right tackle Taylor Moton for the Carolina Panthers. Give it up for the big guys that do it all for us up front. On defense, Aaron Donald, Zach Kerr. Edge rushers was Montez Sweat and Joey Bosa. Linebackers, Nicholas Morrow and David Long. Cornerbacks, Xavier Howard, Chris Jones. And safeties, Darnell Savage and Jimmy Ward. Flex defender, Logan Ryan for the New York Giants. The biggest takeaway, so the 2021 NFL draft might tie the 1983 draft for most quarterbacks taken in round 1. The most quarterbacks ever selected in the first round NFL draft came all the way back in 1983. That year, 6 signal callers heard their names drafted in round 1, 3 of which ended up being Hall of Famers: John Elway, Jim Kelly, and Dan Marino. And given the current state of a few NFL franchises, as well as the play of some college quarterbacks, we might see that record tied next April. So 6 college quarterbacks: Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Kyle Trask, and Mac Jones have or currently produced at a level that warrants early round consideration, and plenty more than 6 NFL franchises will be searching for a franchise quarterback come next April. From the New York Jets and Jacksonville Jaguars, who are all but locked into the first and second overall picks, to the teams that will likely own a fringe top 10 pick, such as the Chicago Bears or the Washington football team, to teams with aging quarterbacks that are picking in the back of the round 1, such as Indianapolis or the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's a lot of supply and a lot of demand. Lawrence and Fields are penciled in as future members of the Jets and Jaguars, but the rest of the bunch is where it gets interesting. So, as we saw on Sunday Night Football, the Bears will be in a conversation to nab the third quarterback off the board. Mitchell Trubisky made his return to the starting lineup and responded with an NFL high-five turnover-worthy plays against the Green Bay Packers. He failed to record a big-time throw and posted a 46.5 passer grade on the night. Chicago started the season with a 5-1 record and has now since lost 5 in a row. The football team will also be in the running for a third quarterback, assuming that they are unable to win the disastrous NFC East. Alex Smith hasn't quite been a liability as a single caller, but the veteran quarterback, who is 2 years removed from one of the worst injuries in NFL history, isn't the long-term solution. Smith earned a 67.9 Pro Football Focus grade in his team's win over Dallas on Thanksgiving Day, bringing his season-long mark to 67.1. However, those aren't the only teams looking for a first half of round 1. That could be looking at quarterback, as a handful of wild cards are in range too, such as the Atlanta Falcons, Denver Broncos, and New England Patriots. So Atlanta is setting itself up to be in quarterback purgatory with an aging Matt Ryan. So, Ryan has had moments where he looks like he is in his prime, posting 4 single game grades above 83 this season, but he's also flashed signs of decline, such as the game against Las Vegas Raiders this past week. Ryan posted a 70.4, the 5th best mark of his 11 starts, and that ranking isn't necessarily horrible, but is less than ideal and far from the level we saw of him in his prime years prior to last season. He's entering the final stages of his playing career, but the Falcons are nowhere near close to being able to win right now. And as for the Broncos, they may be looking to hedge their bet with Drew Lock due to the 2019 second-round pick's performance to date. He has started just 13 games in his NFL career, but it has been entirely underwhelming. Lock's career passing grade sits at a 57.4, and he has shown no signs of progress in his most recent starts prior to missing Week 12 due to COVID protocols. On throws of 10-plus yards downfield this season, he ranks second to last in uncatchable pass rate. Quarterback in round 1 certainly isn't out of the question for Denver, but perhaps the most interesting team out of all of them is New England Patriots. So Bill Belichick has 3 options: extend Cam, draft a quarterback in the first round, or both. Considering Newton's performance this season, there's a strong chance that we see one of the latter two. Newton has had his worst game as a Patriot against the Cardinals on Sunday, generating a 32.5 passer rating, and he led New England to the 24th in per-play passing efficiency this season, and he now ranks 3rd to last in big-time throw rate. And there's already 6 teams, and it's without discussing the franchises in the back half of the first round, Indianapolis and Pittsburgh. On top of that, we could see dark horses in the conversation as well, such as Detroit, Carolina, and San Francisco. Regardless of how you feel about fringe first-round prospects as Trask and Jones, it seems probable that at this rate, they will make their way into day 1 of the 2021 NFL Draft to tie the record. And There's just too much demand at quarterback for it not to be the case. And some of the play in Week 12 verified that. Offensive Player of the Week goes to Jarvis Landry. So this was a close call between him and Tyreek Hill. But the Offensive Player of the Week ultimately went to the Browns receiver for his incredible per route production. Landry picked up more yards per route run against the Jaguars on Sunday than any wide receiver in a single game this season at 6.81. This also over 4.4 yards more per route run than any other game of the season for Landry. His 93.9 receiver grade for the game is the best they've seen this season and is tied for third best over the last 5 seasons. Landry and quarterback Baker Mayfield connected for more explosive receiving plays of 15-plus yards than they have ever did with 6. And the duo helped give the Browns the 5th most efficient passing offense in Week 12, ultimately bringing Cleveland to its 8-3 record on the year. Defensive Player of the Week was Darnell Savage. The Green Bay Packers secondary had to be licking their chops when they found out that Mitch Trubisky would be starting at quarterback for the Chicago Bears. And the second-year safety took advantage of Trubisky under center as he came up with 2 interceptions at deep safety for the Packers and came away with a career best 96.3 grade from Pro Football Focus. And not only was that the highest grade of his young NFL career, but it was the best they've given a safety since Week 13 of 2012 when Kerry Rhodes posted a 97 grade. So the safety did get some help from Trubisky launching into double coverage on his first interception in the second quarter, then launching another into triple coverage in his second one in the third quarter. But at the end of the day, Savage tracked the ball, came up with the interceptions, and didn't get dinged for any mistake throughout the entire game. Rookie of the Week goes to Jeremy Chin for Carolina. He's been amazing. His rookie campaign hadn't been going all that well prior to Week 12, and he just had 2 single-game grades above 70 and fell that short to 47. Then against Minnesota on Sunday, he came out and had himself the best performance for his young NFL career. The Southern Illinois product posted a 89.9 Pro Football Focus grade for the team, or for the game, featuring his highest run defense grade by the year by nearly 20 points. And Carolina might have fallen short against Minnesota, but it was a promising performance as a whole for the 64th overall pick, and who's been kind of up and down recently, but I think he's really good. Offensive line of the week goes to Tennessee Titans, of course, because they just run the ball, man. Derrick Henry has just been eating it alive. It's actually insane. But Secret Superstar of the Week goes to the edge rusher Jacob Tuuti Mariner. So after spending all of 2018 and the first half of 2019 as an undrafted free agent on the Atlanta's practice squad, Jacob has been a key rotational piece for the Falcons, but he never quite had the success in the role prior to Week 12. Jacob had generated just 11 career pressures on 214 pass rushes and earned a 50 pass rush grade over the course of that span. But on Sunday, he was the best pass rusher of the week with a 92.4. So he managed to record over half of his career pressures, totaling enter the game with 4 on 20 pass rushes, which was a strip sack fumble at the end of the first half when Las Vegas was on the Atlanta's 30-yard line with a chance to bring it into one-score game as they were just down 13-3. The play of the week is widely known at this point that Patrick Mahomes and his wide receiver Tyreek Hill are each human highlight reels, and their showdown against the Buccaneers was chock full of them, and the 75-yard touchdown the tandem connected on was hands down the best play that was seen in Week 12. The throw ties the second longest passing touchdown through the air of the season, and Tampa cornerback Carlton Davis had no shot at keeping up with the Cheetah, who also had a monster day like his quarterback, and this was one of 7 explosive plays of 15-plus yards generated by Hill, tying for the most in a single game over the past 5 seasons. And Mahomes to Hill connection in Week 12 was just the third this season to have at least 10 targets in a single game and generate a perfect passer rating of 158.3. So, lethal is an understatement. So, as an early look ahead to Week 13 quickly, Two NFC teams suffered crushing upset losses in Week 12 and will now face off in Week 13 in the matchup that is now even more impactful in the playoff picture. So that is the 7-4 Los Angeles Rams, who will be traveling against the 6-5 Arizona Cardinals in their first of two divisional series showdown this season. LA is coming off hands down the worst offensive outing in the 2020 season. The Rams ranked third to last in EPA per play generated at negative 0.47. Their previous season low was nowhere near that bad in Week 8, and that mark was actually the second worst of Sean McVay's era. And from a pure passing standpoint, only the Denver Broncos had more inefficient passing attack. Needless to say that we're all likely to see some improvement from Week 13, but to what degree, we don't know. And they're also a matchup with a possible playoff seeding implication on the AFC side next week as the 8-3 Tennessee Titans take on the 8-3 Cleveland Browns, specifically with the Browns, who are now actually a playoff team after years of being the laughing stock of the league. Cleveland currently sits at the number 5 seed in the AFC, and a win here will further help their odds of maintaining that spot. And there's going to need Baker Mayfield to be on his A game to do so, and that hasn't been the case for 2020. Mayfield has had a decent outing in Week 12 against a bad Jaguars defense with a passer grade of 81, but that was just the second time this season he's posted a passing grade above north of 75. So we're going to need to see Baker Mayfield do his thing, and this is exactly why I was hesitant to sit here and be like, yeah, after I saw Jarvis do what he did, he deserves a place in the starting lineup. No, not yet. Let's pump the brakes. And I know I still have Austin Hooper in there, but I think that you kind of just have to start him in a tight end barren wasteland that is happening right now. So that is what's going on, man. But we're going to take our second break and we're going to move on to more topics and discussions for the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast coming up soon.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, so let's talk about things that are shifting in the NFL right now. So we saw after Thanksgiving, the Lions have had enough. They have fired Matt Patricia, and it was coming on a Saturday. So, of course, they let him have his day with his family, and then they said, all right, enough is enough. You got to get up out of here. So I know this matters to a lot of different people in the eyes of Lions fans, Detroit's fans. So I am going to take this to a fantasy realm. Why does this matter now? I think this matters because we're probably going to see something pretty catastrophic to the running back group. If you have Adrian Peterson, I think it is time to look. If you can get Kerryon Johnson off waivers, this is the time, because let me tell you, I think Kerryon Johnson is going to start getting some work done. I think Kerryon Johnson is going to start looking good. I think that we're going to start seeing more guys or more plays ran to him as DeAndre Swift gets back from injury. I'm sure DeAndre Swift will probably maintain some of the carries, but I do think that Kerryon Johnson might start getting a bit more passing work. So I think that is going to be quite important in these sort of scenarios. I think that Matt Patricia, for whatever reason, didn't really believe in him. And I know Kerryon would have injuries. He's been injured his whole career, basically. But when he's able to play, he is an explosive runner. We did fumble a few times, but we've seen time and time again that if you give people a chance, they can showcase game. Ronald Jones was fumbling a lot in the beginning of the season, and you could see that, you know, I was in a Clubhouse. So if you have Clubhouse, the application, you can follow me on Hear Me Out. That's my @ name. So if you listen to Clubhouse or you're in Clubhouse, the application that is basically just voice chatting across the spectrums over by all different types of Clubhouses, club topics. Follow me there at Hear Me Out. So let me tell you this right now. Somebody said that Bruce Arians was overrated and that he was a bad coach. I'm not going to sit here and say that Bruce Arians is a bad coach, but I will say that I am very thankful that he is at least allowing Ronald Jones to do work. Now, Ronald Jones has to do a lot on his own in order to give himself proper fantasy value, but there should be no reason Ronald Jones posts numbers that he does sometimes where he literally gets nothing. Ronald Jones will sometimes get absolutely nothing, and it is mind-boggling. Like, from week 1 to 13, well, he has a bye next week, so that's pain on my end, but against New Orleans, he had 10 points. He had 17 carries. Pretty good. He had 2 receptions. Now, his best receiving day was against the Chargers with 6 receptions. So we'll just go ahead and name that out there. He had 10 points against Carolina, where he scored a touchdown, or else he'll just have a 7-attempt, 23-yard game if he didn't score the touchdown. So put that in your mind. Against Denver, 13 rushing attempts with 53 yards, only 9 points. And LA, he had 20 rushing attempts for 111 yards, 18.8 points, week 4. Week 5 against Chicago, 17 rushing attempts for 101 yards, 15.5. Against Green Bay, 23 rushing attempts, 113, 2 rushing touchdowns, best game of his season so far. Against the Vegas Raiders, 13 attempts, 34 yards, and a touchdown, 10 points. Not very utilized too much. Against New York, 7 rushes, 23 yards, 6.6. Against New Orleans, which was a blowout, and they didn't use him in the passing game. 3 rushing yards, 3 rushes for 9 rushing yards. 3 catches for 9 receiving yards. 4.8 points. He had a solid game, more than a solid game against Carolina. He had 23 rushes for 192. As you know, he had the long run, I think the longest run of the season, for 1 touchdown for 24 points, or 24.8 points, which is the second best of the year. Against the Rams, he had 10 rushing attempts for 24 yards total. That was it. 2.4 yards. And then against Kansas City, he had 9 rushes for 66 yards, and he had 1 catch for 37, which went for a touchdown. So all of that to say, Ronald Jones, when utilized properly, gets it in. What ends up happening is, though, he is just the definition of game script. If the game script is not there for him, it is in fact pain for us. If the game script is not there for him, it is in fact pain for us. Because Ronald Jones, if he's game scripted, it's just like, really, you just don't know when it's happening. You don't know when the start's coming. You'd have no chance to know when the start is going to happen to where he is going to fry you this bad. And I'm so tired. Let me repeat. I am so tired of being fried by starting Ronald Jones, not because he's a bad player. See, this is the difference. Ronald Jones is not a bad player. He is not someone who I would refer to be put in the burn book like they do at the Ringer Fantasy Football Show, right? That's not that is not what I feel Ronald Jones has become. He's had plenty of good games. He's a good player. It is about opportunity. It is about whatever Bruce Arians sees in Leonard Fournette, who I think is probably still a good back too, but there's clearly some differences in game, differences in belief system there that I'm just not going to get into just now. But that is the gist. That's what we're working with. That's what we see. That's who we are moving with. Ronald Jones is getting game scripted, and sometimes he's just flat out just not receiving the football enough. Not receiving the football enough. And I don't know why that is, but Tampa Bay is sliding in not positive direction. I don't know what's going on, but that's the direction they're headed, and it's not looking good. Doesn't hurt my feelings in the slightest, though. So keep doing what you're doing because you're doing great. You're doing great, Tampa Bay. Just feed Ronald Jones, and we're all happy here. I think so. I think we are. So that's on that. Matt Patricia, somehow I got on Ronald Jones, but running back by committee systems are not always the best when it's 3 people. So I think they have to find a way to circumvent somebody's touches out of that system, and I think it has to be Adrian Peterson, unless it's goal line work, which in case will probably hold his value to some degree. But until we start seeing some, as far as the wide receivers are concerned, I don't really know where to, like, Tyler Hawkinson is the number one option as long as Kenny Golladay is out on his injury with his hip, and that is just written in stone at this point. I don't think there's really anybody worth owning on Detroit in the receiving game besides him. And, of course, most people's trade deadlines is done. So it doesn't even matter. Like, this is no trade discussions anymore. There's no pickups. Everything is just waivers and prayers. So at this point, your team is what it is, unless something crazy happens in the waiver wire that is going to have everybody's attention. So for all intents and purposes, it might just be time to skip out on the Lions, drop your Lions players, find another option to go get. So let's looky here. Who that can you go ahead and replace to go get some Lions guys, or to replace your Lions guys? I have a couple on my roster right now who I would probably believe in a little bit more than others do. So I am of the mindset that remove all mentality towards what happened in the New Orleans and the Denver game. That matters not. That matters not. That was not a football display. In my whole honest opinion, that was a punishment from the NFL owners, NFLPA, Roger Goodell. It was punishment. That they made them play that game. They made John Elway go ahead and continue to play that game because, in part, of their failure to understand the rules. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Denver as a franchise deserved that bad of a punishment. I'm not saying that they deserved it. What I am saying is, though, it looked like this was a put the hammer down situation to remind the rest of the league what is happening. Because the Steelers and the Ravens at this point might play on Friday for all intents and purposes. They are slated to play Wednesday, but if they get more positive tests, they might have to move it again. And if they move it again, they don't look like this. Keep this in mind here, people. Let's keep this in mind. They're supposed to have been playing on Thursday. Like, there was supposed to be a Thursday night game happening for the Steelers, I believe, or the Ravens. One of the two. I don't think that's happening anymore. I don't think that's happening. This is getting out of control. This is getting completely out of control. I don't know what to think about that, but that Denver game is not a football game. It is not a football game. And just for purpose sake, we should go ahead and probably lay it out in layman's terms what's going on in the Ravens-Steelers game. So it's been postponed to Wednesday, according to Adam Schefter, and the game is scheduled to kick off at 3:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it becomes the first game in the NFL season to get postponed 3 times. The game kicking off at 3:40 p.m. because NBC, which is broadcasting the game, wanted to honor its commitment to broadcast the 88th Rockefeller Center Christmas tree lighting ceremony on Wednesday night. So they wanted to honor that. And with the latest postponement, the Steelers game on Sunday against the Washington football team will now be played Monday, as sources told. And the Week 12 game between the Ravens and Steelers, that were originally, of course, on Thanksgiving night, was moved on Sunday and then shifted again a third time. This will mark the NFL's first game on a Wednesday since 2012, season opener between Dallas and New York Giants, which was scheduled for the day to avoid conflict with President Barack Obama's speech on the Democratic National Convention on Thursday. So, interesting little tidbit there. So, the latest postponement came after the Ravens players said Monday in a telephone conference meeting that they did not want to play Tuesday because of concerns over safety. Baltimore had another positive test on Monday, making it 9 straight days with at least one player testing positive. And the source added one suggestion from the players was to move the game to Thursday, but the NFL compromised by shifting it to Wednesday. And the Ravens would hold a walkthrough Monday night and could hold another one before departing for Pittsburgh on Tuesday. Baltimore has not had a full practice since November 20th in a span of 10 days. The Ravens' Week 13 game against the Cowboys, which has already been moved once to December 7th, might now kick off Tuesday, December 8th at 8 p.m., source told Adam Schefter. So for the Ravens, Monday was perhaps the strangest day in what has been one of the more challenging weeks in franchise history. Players had reported to the team facility in about a half hour, scheduled at 9:30 a.m. practice, when the NFL canceled it to wait for the latest test results. And the Ravens waited most of the day not knowing whether they could practice again that afternoon and board a plane to play the NFL's only undefeated team. The day ended with the game being the AFC North rivals getting moved to another day. So, yeah, man, it's getting kind of wild, but we are going to go ahead and tap into our last break of the podcast and then move into our final duds of the week. We got to talk about our daily fantasy struggles, and we got to continue on. Actually, I want to continue what we were really heading on to, but I just figured for those who didn't know why things were getting moved, what's going on, I had to point that out. But we're going to move into who should you be looking to replace on the Detroit Lions. GSMC. We'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, GSMC, we're back, and I wanted to end the pod off strong, and let's go ahead and get right into it. So who are some people that you can replace with your or you can replace your Detroit Lions receiving core, should we say? I think one strong replacement, if you're looking for a flex player, is KJ Hamler. So KJ Hamler, of course, did not do anything last game. Let's remove that from our mind, because last game, like we said, last game was a punishment from the league as far as I'm concerned. Mask up. That's what the league was telling them. Mask up and shut up, essentially. or shut up and mask up. That's probably what they were probably doing. But week 11, 4 receptions for 35 yards, 7.5 points. He hasn't scored since his first touchdown in week 8 against the Chargers. But after that Chargers game, he's had a 15-point game, a 9-point game, and of course a 7.5-point game. He's getting looks. He's getting decent targets when Drew Lock is playing. And that is all that really matters. So, he was playing more than 75% of the snaps in the offense, and he's currently logged he only logged 58% of the snaps on his win on November 24th, and it was likely due to Drew Lock's protection as he played through a rib injury, because Broncos opted for more 2 tight end sets than usual. So keep that in mind if Drew Lock's injury does stay a relevant storyline within their season. That might be something to look at, but that's just one. I think KJ Hamler is a decent slot receiver for a flex spot that gets a lot of usage, and he might end up being a poor man's version of that really, really good wide receiver out there in Buffalo, and Cole Beasley. So that could be a look for you if you're down bad, like some people can be seen to be these days. So moving forward, I think Denzel Mims has deserved himself a look. Don't look at me crazy here. So Denzel Mims already had 4 catches for 67 yards. He is their best deep threat option, and he is their best throw up guy. He's gotten at least 4 receptions in the past since he's been healthy. The least amount he's gotten as far as receptions was against Kansas City with 2, and even then he had 42 yards. He has not had less than 42 yards since he's came back from injury, and that's a solid sign. So Mims caught 4 of 8 targets for 67 yards on Sunday's loss to Miami, and he tied Brashad Perriman for the team leading targets and catches while coming up 12 receiving yards short on Perriman's team leading total. So the rookie second-round pick is still searching for his first career touchdown heading into Week 13 against the Raiders, but Mims is now top 60 yards on each of the past 3 games, and he also recorded a tackle for the second time in the past 3 weeks, as New York's turnover-prone offense has frequently forced its players to turn into defenders following fumbles and interceptions. So, of course, if you're playing like a keeper league, this is a guy I would be interested in having for a while because he might blossom into something. But for season-long fantasy, he's done decent, and I think is getting closer and closer to the point to where he might be useful, because let's look at his remaining games. So he goes up against Las Vegas, he goes up against Seattle, and then he has the Rams. So he has 2 weeks where things could be like Week 13. It's a risky start, but we already saw what Atlanta was able to do to them. Listen, I know it's the Jets. I understand. And I know what they're trying to do. But we've seen worse things happen. I just think that 10 points straight, back to back to back, is solid. And not everybody's here giving you 10 points in your starting lineup. I know for sure I did not have 10 points in my starting lineup. And at a flex spot, that is priceless, brothers and sisters. That is priceless. And finally, Cam Akers, man. I talked about him earlier. Cam Akers is turning it up, and I think it's finally time. The Cam train is here, and I think it is ready to rev up and go. So that's it. Cam Akers. I already talked about him enough. I've mentioned his name plenty of times this season, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is who I would think you would need to go ahead and look at to try and get off waivers to replace your Lions players not named Tyler Hawkins or TJ Hawkinson, of course, Mr. Swift, and of course Kenny Galladay. So you don't want those things happening. We don't want those things happening. But yeah, that's who I'm projecting to do. That's what I'm looking at here. So let's go ahead and talk about this, shall we? How I did in Daily Fantasy MKF. I can just go ahead and tell you, completely horrible. Completely horrible. Completely horrible. So here we go. Let's go all the way to Thursday, where I thought things were going to be a lot better than what they turned out to be. I had a 4 for 4 slated for Deshaun Watson, who hit his mark, Stafford, who hit his mark, as in I went less on Stafford. I got burned by Will Fuller and Duke Johnson. All over the place. Burned bad. I said Duke Johnson would not get more than 14.5 fantasy points. He got 17. Guess where he's also? My opponent's team. Burned me there. Will Fuller just went berserk. So not too much there to say. You know, it's really boom or bust with Will Fuller sometimes, and he just boomed. It was the appropriate time for him to boom too. Will Fuller busted me in the first half. I said Will Fuller in the first half would not get 8.5 fantasy points. He got 8.9. Pain. So I did Marvin Jones. I said he would not get more than 6.5 fantasy points in the first half. He got 2.2. Called that right. I said for the whole game, of course, that neither one of them would exceed their numbers. Marvin Jones did not, and Will Fuller exceeded it twice over. So that's all fun and games. And then I had a second half bet where I said that Watson would get more. He did end up doing that exact thing. I said Stafford would get more because they had to throw the ball because they were down. They could not move the ball. Stafford only needed about 15 more yards and he would have hit, but that was not the case. I said Will Fuller would get more than 3.5 receptions. He only received 3, so I missed on that. I said that Duke Johnson would get less than 35.5 rushing yards. He got 10. That was right. And I said Brandon Cooks would get more than 38.5 receiving yards, which I was correct at. Let's keep moving on, shall we? I made a second half bet for the Washington at the Dallas Cowboys game. I said Andy Dalton would have more than 130 half passing yards in the second half. I was wrong. I was also wrong about Alex Smith. I was wrong about both quarterbacks. I thought they would have to throw the football. I was entirely wrong. Terry McLaurin did hit for me. I said he'd get more than 51.5 reception yards or receiving yards. I said that Ezekiel Elliott would get less than 39.5 rushing yards, banking that they would throw the ball more. He did end up getting less, but not for the reasons I was hoping for. And I said that Antonio Gibson would get less than 3.5 receptions because that is not his job and that is not what he does. Moving on to Sunday, which was a painful day for me because I just had it. I had it in the bag. I had a 6 for 6, a 6 for 6 that was so just in my hands, just in my hands. That's all I could do is repeat. Sterling Shepard, I said Sterling Shepard would get more than 56.5 receiving yards. He had 64. Banger. I said T. Higgins would get 5 receptions because his line was 4.5. I said he'd get more than that. He got 5. Greatness. I said Wayne Gallman would have more than 60.5 rushing yards. Wayne Gallman got 94. I said that Tyler Boyd would get less than 57.5 receiving yards. He got 15. I said that Brandon Allen would get less than 209.5 passing yards. He had 136. I said that Daniel Jones would get 240.5 passing yards, and he got hurt on one of the final drives of the game where the game was still in the balance because it was a 13-10 game, and he came out and he had 213. I put in $2. I could have won 68. And I was on the verge of hitting big. And unfortunately, that was just not in my cards. I made another big time 6 for 6 bet that went so poorly that I can't even believe it. I said that Matt Ryan would get less than 290.5 passing yards. He definitely got less than that with 185. We talked about his poor performance earlier in the podcast. Said that Josh Jacobs would get less than 75.5 yards because the Falcons' run defense has been stepping it up recently. He got 27. He also got hurt, though. So be that as it may. I said that Derek Carr would have to get 270.5 passing yards, and I went more on that. He got 215. Calvin Ridley, I said Calvin Ridley would get more than 82 receiving yards. He got 50, and that hurts because even if he did get 82.5, I would have still lost this week anyway in fantasy. So why not go for the mile? He got hurt. I said Darren Waller would get 5.5 receptions. He only received 4, and I said Russell Gage would get 4.5 receptions. He only received 3. I was hoping for some sort of a pseudo shootout, and it didn't work. And that's pain. So that's for certain. Then I did one on Jared Goff and Mr. Mullins, Nate Mullins. I said Jared Goff would get less than 275.5, and I said Nate Mullins would get less than 234.5. Nate Mullins has burned me because he got 252. I think it's fair to say that Nate Mullins is enough of an average quarterback to get, and he can get game scripted into 230 and above. So anytime I see Nate Mullins' line, I'm going over. That is for sure. And then I got burned by Taysom Hill. As I said, Taysom Hill would get at least 200 passing yards. He got 78, as we saw. I said Melvin Gordon would get less than 56.5 rushing yards. He got 31. I was correct. And I said Michael Thomas would get more than 5.5 receptions. He only got 4, and that was horrible. So, and then lastly, last night or Sunday night game, I got everything wrong. I said Rodgers. I took the over. It was at 290. Wrong. I took the under on Mitchell Trubisky. Wrong. It was 220. He got 242. I took the over on Devontae Adams at 85.5. Wrong. Took the under on Allen Robinson at 5.5. I was wrong. I took the under on Aaron Jones at 60.5. I was wrong. And I took the under on Robert Tonyan at 3.5, and I was wrong. So, of course, I still have one more to go. So Monday night, I have an upcoming where I took a 2 for 2 to win $7, just to, be able to do something on the weekend, just in case. I went over on both Wentz and Wilson. Wilson is 283.5. Wentz is 235.5. Average quarterbacks can get 240 yards passing, barring injury. Because clearly what we've seen here is that with injury, it does come into question. But that's going to be it for the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. So thank you all for listening and rocking with us, man. It's been really fun. It's been really cool. And I hope everybody sticks through the holiday season and makes it, man. Stay warm out there, starting to bundle up because it's starting to get cold. Bundle up. You'll see me on Friday, or hear me on Friday, I should say. You'll hear me on Friday as we are going to break down what is to come for Week 13, as fantasy season is one game away for a lot of people to get into the playoffs, and it is make or break time for certain. So, with that said, GSMC, I'll see you all Friday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.